Good afternoon. Georgia Douglas Johnson made her mark on American life in several important ways. She was a writer, a poet, an editor, a composer, church organist, and one of the first female African-American playwrights. She was also a devoted activist who played an important role in the Harlem Renaissance movement in the 1920s and 30s. Throughout her life, Johnson spoke out against racial and gender inequity and was a pioneer in the anti-lynching movement. In fact, she was one of the first to explicitly depict these themes in her plays and poetry, sometimes at the expense of appealing to a general audience. Johnson faced many obstacles to her work, from society and even from her own husband, but despite that, she remained an unstoppable force and was a true Renaissance woman. Not only was she a prolific writer with many important poetry collections and plays to her name, but she also had a lifelong passion for music, studying composition at the Oberlin Conservatory in Ohio. She also enjoyed teaching music and composing original works, both of which she did for many years. The words of Johnson are an authentic reflection of who she was, sincere, passionate, and unapologetic, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to discuss her life and work with you today. Georgia Blanche Douglas Camp was born to parents Laura Douglas and George Camp in 1880 in Atlanta, Georgia, where she spent most of her childhood in the nearby suburb of Rome. While excelling in school, she taught herself to play the violin, thus beginning a lifelong passion for music. In 1896, after graduating from Atlanta University, then the first HBCU in the southern United States, Johnson taught primary school in Marietta, Georgia, before leaving to pursue her musical interests at Oberlin in 1902. After leaving Oberlin, Johnson returned to Atlanta, where she worked as an assistant principal at a public school. In the fall of 1903, Johnson married and had two sons with Atlanta lawyer and prominent Republican Party member Henry Lincoln Johnson. They then moved to Washington, D.C. in 1910 after her husband was appointed to serve the Taft administration. Although her husband insisted that she spent more time as a homemaker, Johnson began to devote more and more time to her poetry. And despite his objections, Johnson wrote poems, plays, short stories, songs, and also taught music and performed as organist at the local Congregational church. After her husband died in 1925, Johnson struggled to financially support herself and her two sons, since many well-paying jobs were already given to men. But she was eventually appointed to the position in the Department of Labor by President Calvin Coolidge. Soon after her husband's death, Johnson began what would be 40 years of weekly meetings at her home in D.C. The S Street Salon, as it became known, was an important gathering place among fellow writers of the Harlem Renaissance and helped creativity to thrive by providing a place for African American artists to meet, socialize, discuss their work, and exchange ideas. From 1926 to 1932, Johnson penned Homely Philosophy, a weekly newspaper column that was published in over 20 different newspapers across the country. Her writings, which dealt mostly with inspirational and spiritual topics, helped many to cope with the struggles of the Great Depression. In 1965, for her years of contribution to literature and activism, Johnson was awarded an honorary doctorate from Atlanta University, her alma mater. Johnson died in 1966 in her home, while a sister playwright of hers repeatedly whispered in her ear, poet Georgia Douglas Johnson. She was inducted into the Georgia Writers Hall of Fame posthumously in 2009. Despite her many written publications, poetry was Johnson's first love. She began submitting poems to newspapers and magazines while still living in Atlanta and had her first poem published in 1905. Overall, Johnson published a total of 4 volumes of poetry: The Heart of a Woman in 1918, Bronze in 1922, An Autumn Love Cycle in 1928, and Share My World in 1962. The intersectionality of words and music was a constant and influential force in Johnson's life, making her poetry a natural fit for the art song genre. Like many writers, the themes in her poetry are closely related to the struggles she faced in her life, such as loneliness, isolation, the confining aspects of the roles of women, and race inequality. However, I also find Johnson's voice to be defiant, unwilling to accept the status quo, and dreams of a better life and more just world. The poems I've selected for my song cycle, When I Rise Up, I think wonderfully convey Johnson's unconquerable spirit. The opening movement, Calling Dreams, establishes an unwillingness to accept the current circumstances. Starting from the opening line, the right to make my dreams come true, I ask, nay, I demand of life. Momentum builds from there and climaxes at the phrase, and now at length I rise, I wake, and stride into the morning break. The song concludes with a repeat of the opening phrase, this time sung more freely, almost as if in a daydream. The second song, Common Dust, is a commentary on race inequality, asking simply, who can separate the dust between the high, the low, rich, poor, black, white, red, and all the chromatic in between. The voice is accompanied by an ostinato figure that ebbs and flows with the mood of the text throughout the song. Returning to the idea of dreams once more, the text of the third song, My Little Dreams, consists of a modest two-stanza poem that reads as if Johnson could have written it to herself. In the poem, Johnson speaks of dreams as something that is difficult to think about, writing, I'm folding up my little dreams within my heart tonight, praying that I soon forget the torture of their sight. The idea that her dreams are both close to her heart and also cause her pain can be understood by examining her life's many obstacles. This poem is a beautiful and tender text, which is reflected musically as a comforting lullaby. The fourth song, Your World, returns to Miss Johnson's defiant spirit from the perspective of a bird about to take flight. She starts the poem with the bird in the narrowest nest in the corner with wings pressing close to its side. But as the music steadily builds, so too does the bird's resolve, suddenly overcome with burning desire to travel this immensity. The poem ends defiantly, with the bird soaring to the uttermost reaches with rapture, power, and ease. Similar to the first song, this song ends with a repeat of the poem's opening line, again almost akin to daydreaming. Ultimately, the text symbolizes a passionate soul destined to rise above all troubles. The fifth and final song, When I Rise Up, was the poem that first piqued my interest in Georgia Douglas Johnson's poetry, and I believe encompasses the author's imagination and resilience more poignantly perhaps than the rest. The song opens with an atmospheric piano accompaniment, underlying a series of long melismas by the voice. These melodies slowly progress from a gentle hum to a slightly bigger ooh, and finally a triumphant ah, almost as if the voice is slowly breaking free from its constraints. The text, When I Rise Up, which repeats several times, is accompanied by an ascending melody that evolves over the course of the song. Again, Johnson evokes bird imagery to describe her feelings. When I rise up above the earth and look down on the things that fetter me, I beat my wings upon the air or tranquil lie. Surge after surge of potent strength, like incense comes to me. When I rise up above the earth and look down upon the things that fetter me. The song ends with a slower, more carefree version of the When I Rise Up theme, followed by a final wishful hum to conclude the cycle. When Johnson was awarded her honorary doctorate, she was praised as, among other things, a sensitive singer of sad songs and a dreamer of broken dreams. The poetry featured in this cycle conveys that part of her spirit. Johnson's poems describe the feelings of many African Americans of the time, especially women, including isolationism, racism, classism, and anti-feminist prejudice, yet both her and her words resisted. In the book Color, Sex, and Poetry, writer and activist Gloria Hull argues that Johnson's work ought to be viewed as exceedingly distinguished within the Harlem Renaissance movement, and that African American women writers desperately need and deserve long overdue scholarly attention. I hope that by bringing further awareness to this remarkable woman's life and words, more composers and musicians will seek to create new ways to express Johnson's ideals through music to a wider audience. Thank you for your attention today, and I hope you enjoy this performance of When I Rise Up by two wonderful colleagues, Dr. Lee Gregory and Dr. Andreea Mut.
To make my dreams come true, I ask, nay, I demand of life, nor shall fate's deadly contraband impede my steps, nor countermand. Too long my heart against the ground has beat the dust is around. dreams come true. My And who shall separate the dust? What later shall we be? Whose keen discerning eye will scan and solve the mystery? The high, the low, the rich, the poor, the black, the white, the red, and all the chromatic between. Of whom shall it be said, here lies the dust of Africa, here are the sons of Rome, here lies the one unlabeled, the world at large is home. Can one then separate the dust? Will mankind lie apart when life has settled back again? The same as from the start. I'm folding up my little dreams within my heart tonight, and praying I may soon forget the torture for time's deft fingers scroll my brow with fell relentless art. I'm folding up my little dreams, little dreams. Tonight within, tonight as you make it. And I know, for I used to abide in the narrowest nest in the corner. My wings pressing close to my side. But I sighted the distant horizon, where the skyline encircled the sea, and I throbbed with a burning desire to travel this immensity. I battered the cordons around me and cradled my wings on the breeze, then soared to the uttermost reaches with rapture, with power, with ease. Your world is as big as you make it. Your world is as big as you make it. that fetter me. I beat my wings upon the air, O tranquil when I rise up above the earth. Surge after surge of potent strength, like incense comes. Like incense comes over me. When I rise up above the earth and look down upon the things that fetter